Hello. This is a slightly experimental and probably rather shaky film because I'm currently sitting in a sand dune. At the moment it's a pretty private sand dune, as sand dunes go, and it's also not too windy, which hopefully makes it a suitable place, or more suitable than a busy hostel or right on the beachfront, a more suitable place to do one of these films. I'm, as you can see, this is a fairly rudimentary way of filmmaking, but we'll see how we go. So I thought I'd talk about childhood memories, because we all, if we are asked, we all kind of have a childhood memory. If somebody, sorry, I'm being distracted, I'm worried that there's going to be people coming around the corner or dogs or whatever, but if there are, so be it. So most of us have a childhood memory. Most of us, when we're asked what's the first thing you can remember, most of us have a ready-made answer. It's difficult to know quite how we know that that's our first memory. Usually it's probably because it's been reinforced by our parents, but it's difficult to know whether it's our first memory or indeed whether it's a memory at all. But generally I think our first memories from childhood are of things that seem to be quite insignificant. However vivid they are, they don't seem to be of particularly important things. They seem to be of things that, if we saw them in adulthood, would barely register. And conversely, even though our parents may have told us about all sorts of highly significant facts of our childhood, passions, terrors, fears, traumas, disruptions, we can't remember a thing about those. It's only the insignificant details that we seem to remember. So there's a question of what's happening with memory here. And Freud suggests that these early memories of trivial details are a kind of cover for something. They're a foil for something else which can't be recalled because it's too painful, and it's therefore been repressed. And the way in which these cover memories, or screen memories, as Freud describes them, the way in which they're constructed is via the process of displacement. So displacement is something that Freud talks about particularly in relation to dreams, and it's when the intensity or the emphasis of a particular idea is detached from that idea and attached to another idea. So usually the first idea, the original idea, will have too much intensity. It's too much to bear, and the intensity from that idea or that event will be displaced onto another idea, which originally seems to be quite sort of indifferent or trivial or neutral. And the idea is that the unconscious is made up of psychic energy which is free, it's unbound, it's free to move wherever it wishes, and it's therefore capable of floating away from one idea onto another idea. And Freud describes displacement, as I say, in most detail in relation to dreams, and we can see the way in which the dream kind of operates in a similar way. The dream operates in a similar way to the screen memory, or indeed the symptom, any sort of psychological symptom. So the dream often seems to be full of strange, random, and very unimportant, trivial, unlocalizable details. And when we analyse these, they seem to point towards something else. The manifest content of the dream seems to be a cover, a screen for something else. And technically, we can say that certain troubling ideas are repressed, following the operation of a sensor that we all have inside of us, a system of censorship, and we can say that these ideas are then drawn into the unconscious, and that internal censor uses the mechanism of displacement to bring indifferent, neutral, random, unimportant ideas which maybe do have some link to the idea which has been repressed, to the surface as a substitute, so that the repressed idea can be expressed and lived, albeit in a very transformed way. Apologies for the wobbliness of all of this, but it's quite difficult to hold a book, in fact to hold 3 books at once, because I'm afraid I don't know all of this from memory, or at least I can't recount it from memory. So that's the process of displacement through which the intensity of an important but unbearable feeling or idea gets transferred, displaced onto a more bearable idea, so that the intensity of the original idea can be lived, as I say, albeit in a very different, transformed way. And Freud presents a description of childhood screen memories in the psychopathology of everyday life, of which, hang on a second, I want to show you this because it's got to be the most battered copy of psychopathology of everyday life you've ever seen. Here we go, with an advert for Grey's cigarettes on the back. As you can see, it's kind of waterlogged because I was caught in a monsoon the day before yesterday, but thankfully it's survived. So he presents this description of childhood screen memories in the psychopathology of everyday life, and he does that in order to show how these memories operate by the same process as that of forgetting, and in particular the forgetting of names. And this seems kind of strange, because a screen memory doesn't seem like an act of forgetting. It seems on the face of it like the opposite. It seems like a remembering, but really both are a failure of remembering, and both involve the creation of some sort of substitute idea. So for example, when we can't remember a name, we often try out various other possibilities, all of which eventually we reject, but perhaps they all have some kind of relation in sound or in content to the name that we're really trying to remember. And just to kind of finish with, maybe we should ask the question, because Freud asked this question, why is it that none of us can recall anything? Because these screen memories tend to be from the age of kind of 3 or 4, 3 and upwards. So why is it that none of us can recall anything from earlier than that? Why can't we remember anything from the age of 6 months? And we take it for granted that we can't. But is there really nothing kind of noteworthy about this? Nothing that we can say about it? Aren't these early experiences, these first couple of years, these experiences which we've forgotten, aren't they the very experiences that constitute us, and remain so frustratingly hardwired within us? They're the very things that haunt us, that trouble us. They interfere in our relationships. They make us seek out a therapist, perhaps. And eventually they're the things that we realise that therapy, or indeed anything else, can't reverse or undo. And these screen memories, so mine for example, was actually in a setting a little bit like, well, not quite like this, but my first memory, which I don't know if it really is a memory, is of my Auntie Daphne pushing me in a pushchair down to the shores of the local river, the River Stour in Suffolk. And this is, I think, the characteristics of this memory follow those characteristics that probably many of you will have had with your first memories. They're very distinctive, these screen memories. Clearly they're unreliable. They've been rewritten over time. New elements have been added, or old elements have been changed as we learn new things. And like dreams, they're often, as this one of my Auntie Daphne pushing me in a pushchair, they're overwhelmingly visual. like dreams are. And in these early memories as well, there's an odd detail that we almost always see ourselves as if from a place hovering above, or some sort of displaced situation. We see ourselves, we're centre stage in the memory, a little bit in the manner of a fantasy, but not in the manner of how a child or indeed an adult perceives a situation at the time. So that's just a little bit about screen memories, but the process, this process by which the intensity of something unbearable is displaced onto something that is bearable. So perhaps we could say that being pushed in a pushchair by Auntie Daphne is bearable, it's a bearable memory, but it covers up for something perhaps that I can't bear to bring to mind. And we see this in these sort of memories, in dreams, in jokes, in symptoms, in slips of the tongue, in short, in anything where the unconscious is in operation. We got through it without being blown away or without me getting sand in my eyes. Hurrah.